What's up, guild members? I'm the guild master of TT Tomes, and this is me going over the Laws of the Realm resource that I use in my games. And if you like this sort of content, head over to our Patreon. It's free for you to join and get a lot of content like this, the Laws of the Realm, even our Herbalism Crafting Guide, over 180 different options for your players to find and scavenge while they're out traveling. And right now, about 18 homebrew subclasses. Alright, one reason I really like this resource is because it's almost inevitable. One of our players at some point is going to get in trouble with the law. It's just a part of D&D. Below we have a list of crimes and possible penalties for each crime. When I listed this out, each penalty is not intended to always be used. Committing a crime doesn't mean that you get every penalty that's listed. You should have fun as a DM and pick and choose what you feel fits the situation. Committing crimes against town guards, nobles, and other officials, whatever the DM feels is a notable or important NPC that would have pull. These punishments oftentimes are on the more severe side, especially gold fines. Like if you're getting in trouble with a noble, there's going to be increased punishments that come with it. A lot of times that also applies to adventurers as well. I know me and my players, they're stacked with cash a lot of the times, so I may have to multiply some of these penalties as well if it's a gold fine. DM discretion. A lot of these fines say up to a certain amount, so all of this is for the DM to play with as they see fit. Another great thing is community service. That could be as simple as accepting a quest, doing discounted jobs. That's plot tie-ins for the DM. Your people get in trouble. Maybe they don't have the money to pay it off. Maybe they're haggling with the people. Community service could be something that the DM has in their back pocket as a quest line to go kill some troublesome animals or bandits or deal with a situation for the town. Also, if the DM wants to talk with a player that's getting in trouble and possibly going to jail, on the back end, I know I would love to take this opportunity to check, hey, are you okay with this character going to jail? If so, like, if they want to bring in a new character, if it's a mutual decision for the DM and the players, that's something that I would like to do. If the rogue is going to jail and he's been wanting to play a different character, then that's a great time. If the group doesn't want to just bail him out. Maybe they go shopping and bail out someone else that looks insanely powerful that's locked up in the jail, and then that's the character's new NPC. However it feels natural to handle these. So when I was looking at this, I broke it up into non-violent crimes, violent crimes, and arcane or magical crimes. So going through the non-violent first, we have arson. Setting fire to property. Penalties up to a 500 gold piece fine. Community service, which again could be a quest line. Flogging, which is essentially a beating. Real quick, let's look up flogging definition. A punishment in which the victim is hit repeatedly with a whip or stick. I'm gonna go with stick. So it's a bunch of people with clubs that get to beat you. The beating would be depending on the severity of the crime. Imprisonment, up to 5 years. Another possible penalty, restitution to victims, or up to 2 days in the stockade, which is pretty much, pull up an image of a stockade for anyone that doesn't. Where they had, yep, this guy here. Up to 2 days in the stockade. If someone was kind enough to bring you water or something to eat, depending on the severity of your crimes, they may or may not give you that privilege. Blackmail. Threatening someone via personal information or circumstance. Penalties up to a 500 gold piece fine. Community service. Again, flogging. Imprisonment. Restitution to victims. So if you're blackmailing someone, I really like the idea of restitution to victims because it's like the DM gets to decide how you get to make it right with the most likely NPC that you've been blackmailing. Like, what would the NPC say you could do to make it up to them? Is my idea of restitution to victims, or stockades up to 2 days. Bribery, offering money to officials for special favors. Penalties up to 1,000 gold pieces. This can be more severe, trying to influence the systems in place by penalties and bribery. Imprisonment up to 5 years. Flogging, which might be a more severe beating than if you just set a petty fire that no one was hurt in. Uh, stockades up to 2 days for bribery. You have a lesser charge here, in my mind, disturbing the peace. So engaging in disruptive behavior. This is very vague. This is probably going to be what you can hit your players with a lot of the time when they're in town doing things, is disturbing the peace. A lot of what our players do is chaotic or disruptive behavior by commoner standards. Penalties, normally only 2 gold piece fine. This is one of those moments where it's like adventurers might get that multiplier, so it's like a 10-piece gold fine, depending how the DM wants to run it. It can be community service, flogging, and again, this is the idea of flogging for disturbing the peace is more for repeat offenders. I don't imagine people disturb the peace their first offense and guards run up and start beating them. Same thing with stockades. I feel like these last two here, and again, this is all DM discretion on which town they're in. Some towns may be more strict than others, or even disturbing the peace. If a noble charged you with that, it may come to stockades kind of thing. So again, it's how the DM wants to handle these different punishments in different situations. If my players disturb a noble or the town official, or the town master, it's definitely going to be a higher fine. And if it's more than once, it's going to be the stockades. I would love to try to put my players in the stockades to see if they're going to resist arrest, which is another charge later on. So embezzlement is the next one. Essentially, if you misappropriate funds. I have a dwarf character that is going around trying to take collections for the Person Kind Salvation Fund. He's really just going around saying, I'm an adventurer, if you keep me stocked I can better save people. But he's a greedy dwarf, so if he wants to eat, that's coming out the fund. So I feel like embezzlement could definitely have been something that my DM hit my dwarf with at times. Probably not something that your players are going to come up with too often, but you never know. Better to be prepared in D&D. Penalties for that: community service, a gold fine equal to the amount of the embezzled funds. So that kind of potentially scales with the offense. Forced labor is another penalty for embezzlement. Since you're trying to get off easy and live off other people, forced labor for yourself. Imprisonment up to 5 years, and restitution to victims, making it up to those you stole from. Fraud. In my game, I definitely have the concept of IDs for players. I also have a resource on my Patreon here, which is free, like this one that I'm going over, which goes over forgery kits. So fraud is definitely something that can come up against my players in character, without going too far out of the way with the resources I've given them. Penalties would include community service, fines equal to the crime. So again, this can kind of scale depending on what was forged. A beating, which is the flogging here. Imprisonment up to 5 years, restitution to victims, or stockades up to 2 days, depending on if you're making fake library cards or fake passports. Grand theft. This is going to be a fun one because anything my players steal is expensive enough to go into this category. So grand theft is stealing items or things like horses, a horse thief, magic items, and essentially property over 50 gold pieces. That's a lot of money for a commoner, and that starts to cross over into the grand theft category. At least in my setting, every DM can handle this differently. Penalties: you can be branded a thief. A fine in gold equal to the item that was stolen. So if you're stealing something really expensive, it's going to be a higher fine versus someone that stole a healing potion. Flogging, yeah. Most likely the people that you stole from are going to give you a pretty good beating. Imprisonment, up to 20 years for grand theft. It's a bigger crime. So essentially, in my setting, if you are trained by a guild, which is kind of the real life equivalent in my mind of like a college degree, you can expect to make around 2 gold pieces a day, give or take a couple gold pieces. That's like the average income of a commoner. So grand theft is a pretty serious crime, stealing expensive items. Identity theft. Again, before I said I have the concept of IDs in my world. So identity theft is taking on a specific creature's form or stealing their ID. So it can be as simple as one of my players using disguise self to turn into a guard that they saw around town, uh, or a shopkeep, or even going as far to try to steal whatever they show to identify themselves. Uh, that is a serious crime. Penalties up to 1,000 gold pieces as a fine. Flogging, which is going to be more on the serious side. Imprisonment up to 10 years. Making it up, restitution to the victims, or even the stockades for up to 2 days. And again, if they are impersonating a guard or a noble, an official, someone of note, these penalties tend to go up even more. So at least on the higher side, the more strict side of these punishments here. Impersonating a guard or a noble. That's going to be more severe than identity theft because you are impersonating an official that keeps us safe or someone of import. So up to 2,000 gold piece fine. Imprisonment most likely going to be up to 10 years as well. Restitution to victims and stockades up to 2 days. Littering, a minor offense, but again, one that might be multiplied for adventurers that are overflowing with gold. Uh, Improperly disposing of waste. Penalties, up to 2 gold pieces of a fine for commoners. That's the normal amount for it. Community service or stockades for a fourth of the day. So it's like the morning, the early afternoon kind of thing. It's about a 6 hour period that someone would be in the stockades, and this is more like I'm imagining more severe offenses, maybe for your players, but in character, this you might see a merchant that's been caught like dumping trash in the wrong areas in the stockades. It's going to be a more serious offense for someone to go to the stockades for littering, unless you want to try and put your players in the stockades. I think that's going to be really fun to see my players or anybody's players try to get put in the stockades for any of these crimes. Perjury is a little harder. I don't see this coming up as often with your players, but you may have a court scene with your players. So this could be something that they're at least threatened with at some point. But gold pieces up to 1,000 and fines. You could be branded as a liar. Now, whenever I have branding on any of these punishments, as whenever they're listed as a penalty, it's not something I ever see myself doing with my players. It was more me being true to the crime. I don't see myself branding my players as a liar or a thief, but I feel like it could be threatened by the guards in the moment. Uh, Imprisonment up to 10 years, or even thrown into the stockades for up to 2 days. Petty theft. This is a lot of stuff, at least for commoners in D&D. Small, inexpensive things. I'm not sure if a lot of these are going to be what your players are stealing. I don't know if they're like not paying for meals when they leave the tavern, or maybe if they steal a bag of ball bearings. Like, these are petty thefts. Most of the things our players steal are going to be grand theft. But as far as petty theft, which is what they might see a lot of commoners locked up for, you can pay up to a 10 gold piece fine. Community service, again, beating, depending on what was taken. I do imagine that in some places, a beating might be the most common punishment. They may even forego fines. They may just beat someone and then just like go on about their business. Imprisonment, up to a month for petty theft. Restitution to the victims, or even thrown into the stockades for a day. And when people are normally thrown into the stockades, it's normally more of a public event. Publicly disgrace them. Like, that's when a lot of people like to throw tomatoes. If the crime is more severe, maybe rocks. But this is when townsfolk can come by and voice their displeasure with the person as they're on display in the stockades. So, poaching. If you have druids in your party, maybe they might be sent after poachers. Poaching is illegal hunting, or essentially, yeah, illegal harvesting of wildlife. Penalties up to 25 gold piece fine. That's gonna be a sizable fine for commoners, for a lot of commoners. Confiscation of hunting gear. Imprisonment up to 8 months. Loss of hunting rights altogether, or even thrown into the stockades, where your druid would be able to go up and heckle these poachers as they are locked up and unable to essentially, yeah, defend themselves from tomatoes and rotten vegetables being provided to onlookers. Possession of illegal substances / spell components. Again, every DM is able to run their world how they see fit. In my world, catnip is a controlled substance for the simple fact I want tabaxis to be able to approach my players, open up a trench coat, and offer them bags of assorted catnip. I think it's funny, so catnip got thrown on the illegal substances radar in my setting. Or even spell components. If they find things that look like they are involved in necromancy, that can be something that can get you in trouble with the law, essentially. Up to 1,000 gold piece fine. Community service. Imprisonment up to 5 years. Or thrown into the stockades for up to 2 days. Public intoxication. So this isn't just being drunk in public, because how else would people enjoy the tavern? Public intoxication, at least in my setting, is being drunk and causing a disturbance. So if you are causing a disturbance while drunk, you are getting public intoxication. If the guards are feeling like they want to tack on more charges, you also might get a disturbing the peace charge as well. These two go hand in hand. So if they're being nice, they might just charge you with public intoxication. If they're trying to milk the adventurers, like I personally think most towns guard would, then you could definitely hit them with these charges at the same time easily. Penalties up to 5 gold pieces. A lot of times I will hit that with a +5 or a ×5 multiplier for my players if they are, or if they have a lot of cash on them. These fines tend to be pretty good as is with low level parties, but once my party start getting mid range, I would definitely multiply some of these fines gold piece fines by 5. So up to 25 gold pieces for anyone that is charged with public intoxication. The barrel o' shame. This is one of my favorite punishments. It's essentially the Monopoly barrel. And this right here is essentially going to be the barrel o' shame in my mind. This is probably got shame written on it right across the front. They got to wear the barrel o' shame around, probably until they're sober, maybe even a bit longer. DM discretion how long they got to wear it, or imprisonment until they're sober, which is essentially a drunk tank. Throw them in, let them sober up, and then let them out after they're done being an issue. Then we have resisting arrest, running or escaping from authorities, essentially making the arrest go harder than it has to be. This is going to be something that you can add on to pretty much any charge if your players give you a hard time while the authorities are doing what they're doing. Penalties up to 20 gold piece fine, community service, good old flogging. As far as imprisonment, it'll add more time to whatever sentence they were already looking at. DM discretion on how long you want to add. For me, it'd probably be a couple of months, couple weeks, couple months. Restitution to the victim, and stockades up to a day. Slavery in the realms is owning sentient creatures as property. Penalties for that is going to be pretty severe, up to 2,500 gold pieces per slave. Branding as a slaver, and imprisonment 5 to 10 years per slave, along with restitution to the victims, most likely the slaves in this case. Smuggling, transporting illegal goods, up to 500 gold piece fine, confiscation of smuggled goods, good old-fashioned flogging, imprisonment 1 to 5 years, or up to 2 days in the stockades. Treason in the setting, at least in my setting, is acting against the crown or the ruling government. Penalties for that. Death is among the highest penalty for treason. Life imprisonment. And most likely they're going to take property or possessions that belong to you. Just the government sweeps in, and yeah, treason is a pretty serious charge. Trespassing, up to 50 gold pieces if you're entering private or restricted areas. Imprisonment can be another thing, especially if it's a repeat offense on like a residential kind of area, or if it's a pretty serious restricted area that your players are caught trespassing. Imprisonment up to 6 months could be common. Flogging, restitution to victims depending on where or how the trespassing occurred, or even up to a day in the stockades. Vandalism is another one of those minor crimes, up to 2 gold pieces of a fine. Community service, flogging, restitution to victims, and up to half a day in the stockades. And this is, again, petty crimes. Now we're getting into more violent crimes in the realm. Aggravated assault is serious fighting or attacks. This is when people are getting injured. This is above bar brawls here. This is weapons are included, maybe even spells were cast. Penalties up to 250 gold pieces, and again, this is definitely geared more towards commoners that to stop a neighbor going over to another neighbor's house with a club. 250 gold pieces may not be as fitting for adventurers. That is completely up to DM discretion. But a lot of my players have a lot of money, and this could definitely be something that gets multiplied if it fits your setting with your adventurers. Imprisonment 1 to 10 years is the normal punishment, or one of the normal penalties for aggravated assault. Community service can be another common one. Good old-fashioned flogging, restitution to victims. How can you make it up to the people you assaulted? And up to 2 days in the stockades. Attempted murder, trying or even just almost killing someone can sometimes result in attempted murder charges. Penalty up to 500 gold piece fine. Flogging, imprisonment 5 to 20 years, and restitution to the victims. Kidnapping pretty much has the same type of penalties as attempted murder. If you're kidnapping, which is taking or holding a creature against its will, its life is in danger. So the penalties are pretty much the same, up to 500 gold piece and a fine, flogging, imprisonment, or restitution to victims. Restitution to victims is probably going to be a big one with kidnapping, depending on what they were asking for or what the situation was. How can you make it right? That's going to be restitution to victims is going to be another fun one for DMs. How does the NPC say that you can make this up to them? Or the judge order you to make it up to them? Minor assault. This is the bar fights, the more simple skirmishes where someone's life, where people didn't feel lives were endangered during the fight. You felt like it was going to be he got knocked out and that was it. Aggravated assault is more someone is fearing for their life during this skirmish. But for minor assault, penalties up to 10 gold pieces. And again, this is keeping commoners in mind that might have that bar brawl in the tavern. Up to 10 gold pieces. This is why it definitely could see a multiplier for player characters, where it's more like 50 gold pieces if they're caught getting into a bar brawl, which could be fun to see. The adventurers paying 50, and the person that they fought in the bar brawl, who's not an adventurer, only getting charged a fraction of the cost. Community service, flogging, imprisonment, a shorter time, 1 to 4 weeks, and this might be for either someone who's a repeat offender, who's always getting into bar fights, or if it was a particularly nasty fight, maybe you had a good bard lawyer who got it knocked down from aggravated to minor, you still might get imprisonment for up to 4 weeks. Again, DM discretion if you want it longer, shorter. Restitution to victims, and stockades for up to a day for minor assault. Murder charges. Murder's pretty straightforward on what murder is. Penalties up to 2,500 gold piece fine for murdering. You could potentially be branded as a murderer. If someone has murdered multiple people and they've become kind of like a serial killer in the realm, that might be something that you see, or your players might see on someone if it fits your setting. A common thing for murderers is being put to death. Life imprisonment can be another thing. If they got off easy, maybe just life imprisonment. Also, restitution to the victims. Maybe if one of your players is charged with murder, how can they make it right to the family? Maybe the family sends them on a quest to go get diamonds from this monster-infested mining shaft. So if they make it back out, they have the means to revive the person. Just ideas. All of these could just be potential quest lines for however the DM sees fit. Public endangerment. Reckless or negligent behavior in public areas. This is going to be another big one for your players, especially if they are magic users. If they're just doing dangerous things in town that could potentially hurt someone, it's going to be a pretty serious fine, up there with aggravated assault. Penalties up to 250 gold pieces and a fine. Community service, good old-fashioned flogging, imprisonment up to 8 months in more severe cases, restitution to victims, or even stockades for up to 2 days. Uh, Public endangerment is one of those general charges. A lot of things can fall underneath the public endangerment. If a guard essentially doesn't like what an adventurer is doing in that area, and if it's causing a scene, and if it could hurt someone, it could be a public endangerment charge. Reckless riding, riding your or endangering the public with your mount. So that could be something that happens to your players. This was more just included in the laws of the realm. Maybe if your player was role playing drinking at the tavern pretty hard, and then they are driving their horse somewhere, maybe have them make an animal handling check at disadvantage. If they fail, maybe a guard feels like they are reckless riding, so they're going to get reckless riding charges. Maybe public endangerment as well. It could be even disturbing the peace or public intoxication. So multiple charges could come up from reckless riding, depending if the DM sees chances for these to happen, if they even want to pursue these little uh, in-game infractions. Options are just another way to help the world feel a little bit more in depth. On to magical crimes, and most often the most serious, like the first one here, gifting cursed magic or gifting cursed items. Yes. Knowingly or even unknowingly giving a cursed item to someone. Uh, Penalties up to 5,000 gold pieces as a fine. This is one of the most serious charges is getting into magical crimes. 5,000 gold piece fine, imprisonment up to 5 to 20 years, and restitution to the victims. If you can make this right, that's going to be one of the biggest things. But cursed items is a big thing. Okay, there is practicing forbidden magics like necromancy, blood magic, etc. Penalties similar to dealing with cursed magic items can go up to 5,000 gold pieces in fines. Uh, Worst case scenarios, and nothing I would implement on my players, but they might run into it for story reasons, would be amputations, possibly branding, could be uh, branding as an occult mage, life imprisonment in serious cases, and loss of magical licenses. Unlawful spellcasting. This is my favorite charge on here. Unlawful spellcasting is casting on an unwilling creature or using magic in generally unwanted ways, even casting magic without a license. Uh, I'll make another video on just the concept I've had about magical licenses and just IDs in my setting. It's something that's add a bit of role play, just a little bit of deeper thought to things at times. To each their own, not something for every setting, but something that I've enjoyed with my players. Uh, Unlawful spellcasting. Even casting a simple cantrip on someone is, if they are an unwilling creature, is unlawful spellcasting. It doesn't matter if that's prestidigitation, if it's unwarranted. It is essentially magical assault. Or even if your players are casting large illusion spells in the middle of town and claiming that it's not hurting anyone, it doesn't matter. If the guards tell you to stop it and you don't, it can be unlawful spellcasting. Uh, like I said, if you show that you can use magic in my setting and you're not someone that the government knows who you are, that's like in real life essentially having a firearm without having a social security number. The government's not going to like that. They want to have a way to know who people are, especially if they have magical means. All of that can be unlawful spellcasting, and it can be 375 gold piece fine, up to community service, flogging, imprisonment 1 to 10 years, loss of magical licenses, restitution to any victims if it's applicable here, like if you're casting on an unwilling creature, possibly up to 2 days in the stockades. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and edit something here. I've had edits coming this whole time as I've been going through it, but forced registration with arcane authorities. And I'm adding forced registration with arcane authorities because if you are caught casting without a license, that is essentially what would happen. You would need to register. You would probably pay a fine and then have to go register with the arcane authorities, which is essentially the magical DMV. Unlawful spellcasting, like I said, that's my favorite because I've had players in taverns cast control water to splash people in the face with their own drinks. That is unlawful spellcasting. That's a prime example. I've had one person ask, prestidigitation says that you can create a harmless sensory effect. So the harmless effect that they wanted to do was turning the inside of someone's eyelid into the texture of a tongue, so that every time they blink, it would feel like there's a tongue licking their eyeball. I definitely was horrified, but I allowed it because I felt like it was within the parameters of the spell. But that is 100% unlawful spellcasting on someone. Casting magic in generally unwanted ways or on an unwilling creature. If they are willing, great. If they are not willing, you cannot do it. Unlawful summoning. This is something that I see coming up easier against players because this does include familiars on the lower side. If they are in an area that doesn't want you to have familiars and you conjure a familiar, that can be something on the lower end. Probably wouldn't get them 500 gold piece fine in my mind, but I'm sure that they have charged a lot of wizards with summoning familiars in restricted areas. I'm sure in my setting there are more upscale inns and taverns that know familiars are pretty much like little drones and spy cams. They don't want that. So some places may not like that. Again, this is DM discretion for your setting, but this is a lot of times on the higher end for things like people summoning herds of fey creatures as animals, conjuring like the spell conjure animals, or even larger extraplanar things that could be threats. This is a bit more broad as far as what you might summon. It could be high in summoning, could be low in summoning. Don't summon things in restricted areas is essentially unlawful summoning. Unless you are registered with the authorities in that area and you are clear to bring in your familiar or whatever else you might be bringing in from another plane of existence. Unregistered teleportation. Teleporting to or from restricted areas. This might be something that happens in like banks, arcane colleges, jails. There are certain places where people are okay with you teleporting in and out of, and this is that charge that you might get if you're just popping in and out of the local jail. Guards might tell you stop that. Up to 500 gold pieces in that fine. Up to a 500 gold piece fine. Community service, flogging, imprisonment, up to 5 years. Loss of magical licenses. Restitution to the victim if it's applicable here, or even up to 2 days in the stockade. If you need a local jail map. We have one here as well. You can find at the bottom of the list of charges here. This jail is going to come with, as soon as you walk in from the bottom area here, a small waiting room. Behind that, a small clerical area, like where it's books and scrolls, where they keep their record keeping area. Walking farther in, you have lower scale jail cells on both sides, for more of the common riffraff. If you make your way farther back, you have uh, luxury cells in back, I'll say. Uh, they are bigger, 10 by 10 feet, have a little spread of food set out on the tables. It's a lot more comfortable in back versus the straw bedrolls that they have up front. You have a guard area over towards the right with a guard entrance and back, and then towards the left you have a warden's office with a private secretary office and waiting room out front. So a general jailhouse map for you there, should you need it, should it come up against your players. If you like what you see and you want to see more resources like Laws of the Realm, head over to our Patreon. You can check this out and our homebrew subclasses and more things like our herbalism crafting guide, forgery kits, structures and strongholds resource, and more that we create.